Hello and welcome to the official launch of the trilogy published book, Faith Warrior, a memoir of the acts of God. We're gathered here today with Dr. Evelyn and family and friends who we will be learning about her experience, her journey and process of writing this book. And we're going to get to hear from others who've had a chance to read the book and share their thoughts, their highs, and what challenged them as they were reading. So stay tuned.
Faith. What is it? Being sure of our hope. Convinced of what we can't see. By faith, we understand the world was set in order at God's command. By faith, Abel offered God a greater sacrifice than Cain, and for his faith, God commended him as righteous. By faith, Noah trusted God and constructed an ark for the deliverance of his family. By faith, Abraham was willing to sacrifice Isaac, his only son, believing God would still fulfill his promises. By faith, Moses chose to be mistreated with the people of God, rather than enjoy sin's fleeting pleasure. By faith, God's chosen nation crossed the Red Sea on dry ground and praised him as it swallowed up the Egyptians. By faith, Rahab the prostitute escaped destruction because she welcomed the spies in peace. Time will fail me if I tell of Gideon, David, and the prophets. By faith, they administered justice, shut the mouths of lions, quenched raging fire. But others were imprisoned, murdered, and wandered in deserts, mountains, and openings in the earth. We are surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses. So get rid of every weight, of every sin, and run with endurance the race set before us. Keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. He is the champion and guide of our faith.
Hello and welcome once again. My name is Jasmine. We're so excited you were able to join us today. Like I said before, we're joined with Dr. Evelyn Roberts, the author of Faith Warrior, a memoir of the acts of God. And we're joined here by family and friends who will be sharing their experiences with us. So we hope you can invite someone and join us in the conversation. So before we start today, I would like for us to go around and introduce ourselves. And so we'll start with you on my left.
I'm Leanne Roberts.
I'm Dr. Evelyn Roberts.
Hey everyone, my name is David Obendarko.
Hi everyone, my name is Linda Agadzi.
Hi, I'm Susan Hawkins Barton.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody. So I'm so excited you're here. I don't know about you, but I'm excited to have a copy of Faith Warrior in my hand. I mean, what a title, what a cover. This is so exciting. Before we start, I just want to ask everybody, what were your first impressions about the book? Cover-wise, title-wise. I mean, this is a picture that is very, makes a big statement. So I guess I'll ask David, and then we can all just kind of go around.
Initially, when I saw the cover of Faith Warrior, I was thinking about this book could potentially be like a prayer book in terms of how to be able to deal with different issues that you go through in life. But I guess it has a bit of that, but this is more of I would say like a personality book. I would say like something more so a confident book in terms of showing you how who God is and how when you incorporate God into your life, He can boost your confidence. So it's more of a book on faith, but also in terms of building your confidence as well.
Awesome. Miss Linda, would you like to jump in?
Absolutely. I love this book so much. When I look at the warrior on this book, it looks like an overcomer.
Right.
I went through so much, but I have been able to overcome.
That's awesome.
And the stories, it's a story about someone, or Dr. Evelyn, who's been through so much and has written all these calculatively in this book. Talking about her life stories and how after every trial and every tribulation she overcame every one of it through the Bible and all the things that God says. And so I have enjoyed every one of these stories in this memoir.
That's awesome. Leanne, Susan, anything you want to add about it? Picture, I mean.
Oh yes, the cover of this warrior, he's wearing his shield, which represents everybody. It could be anybody under that shield, and he's looking upward towards the sky for continuing directions from God. It's like, I'm here, I have arrived. I'm walking in the path that you have put before me, and I'm still looking up towards you for strength. He's merely, God being a vessel through this warrior to help us all. It was a very enjoyable book.
Awesome. Anything you would like to add?
I loved the cover of the book. It's one of the reasons why I read the book. Firstly, because the title is so simplistic. 2 words, but 2 profound words. The word faith, which I'm always wanting to grow in.
Wow, yes.
And warrior, which was silhouetted by this beautiful picture of a true warrior who is decked out in uniform, ready. He's standing there watching, looking at the horizon, anticipating, watching and waiting to see what's to come. And what's to come in this book is timeless. It's it's just so powerful.
Yes.
The stories and the testimonies of the author, Dr. Evelyn. And you were able to become a part of the story in certain chapters, depending on the life that you've led. She drew you in. I loved how she supported her personal stories with some history.
Yes.
And some facts. And I so appreciated this book from cover to cover, and I thank her for writing a short book. I'm not an avid reader. So I loved how quick I got through the book, because I just ate it up.
Yes. I think all of this is some great observations. I agree with you, Miss Suzanne, when you said, it looks like they've arrived for me. I'm like, are they going? Are they coming?
Yes.
Where are they on their journey? But either way, you see such a calmness in their poise and in their precision, just like, man, I'm here and I'm ready for what lies ahead, and I'm so grateful for what has been behind. So luckily we have the author here with us, Dr. Evelyn. Dr. Evelyn, if you can you just give us some insight on why you chose this picture, why the title Faith Warrior? I mean, can you fill us in?
Thank you, Jasmine. I was thrilled just listening to each and every one of you give your take on the cover and everything. And I'm like, wow, it's all, somebody will say all of the above. And I would say I chose this picture, Faith Warrior. I got the inspiration from Ephesians chapter 6. And Ephesians chapter 6 talks about the armor of God for the believer. And how we must put on the whole armor of God so that we'll be able to stand against the wiles of the enemy. So you will see in the picture, we have the helmet of salvation. The guy is wearing the helmet. I would say that the garment that he's wearing, the robe of righteousness through Jesus, and the blood, because it's also red. And then we have the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. And then you see the shield of faith. And as you all said, he's standing, because the Bible says that we should have our feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. And he's ready, he's on the go. to go share his faith with whoever will listen, poised for instructions to launch out. And of course, what we don't see behind the scenes is praying with all prayers and supplications. And then we also have the breast, I talked about the breastplate of righteousness. And beneath this garment, the Bible also talks about we should wear the belt of truth. So as believers, we walk in the truth of God's word, and that's how we overcome. And I chose the title, it's also inspired by the same thing, that we wear the armor and we launch out to war. You don't go into war or battling the enemy without your proper armor on. And in Timothy, you realize that Paul urged the young Timothy to fight the good fight of faith. So as believers, we are faith warriors.
Awesome. I mean,
That's powerful.
thanks for that insight. It's really good to see that. And I think this book is so timely, especially looking at the times that we live in with the pandemic and the civil unrest in our country. I mean, everybody is fighting the good fight of faith, and it looks different for everyone. You know, we can't, we don't know if we're going, we don't know if we're coming, but it looks different for everybody who's fighting this. I wanted to pivot a little bit. According to the dictionary, a warrior is a person who is engaged or experienced in warfare. They are defined as being brave or having great courage, and is usually used to describe a person who is strong and doesn't give up easily. And I want to go back again to Dr. Evelyn. You know, this is a memoir about the Lord's goodness in your life and the acts of God and the things that you've seen God do in your life and on your behalf. And would you agree with the dictionary definition that a faith warrior or warrior is somebody experienced in battle? And would you say somebody who doesn't give up easily? Are they brave? Do you agree with these adjectives used to describe said warrior?
Okay. I think I would say that in theory, I agree. The warrior is brave, he's courageous, and all the nice things that you said. But in principle and in experience, I would say that I didn't begin from that place. You have to believe God in little things. It begins step by step, and then you get to that place where you are now taking on a whole Goliath. And I think to drive home that, I want to read a portion of the book that describes where I was and then where I am right now. And that is in chapter 15.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm reading chapter 15, page 117, as depicting the fact that a warrior doesn't begin as a brave person.
Right.
It's the little steps that you take
To get there.
that gets you
Yes.
there.
So good.
And chapter 15 talks about the trial of my faith. And this is a portion that deals with when I lost my older brother. And I'm describing
yes.
some of the feelings I had been through. I said, the feeling of depression, numbness, sorrow, grief, doubts, fear, anger, disappointment, and disillusionment continued for another 6 months. Then one day, I read a magazine that contained stories and pictures of miracles that God had performed in the lives of other people. These stories sparked a ray of hope. It aroused my curiosity as to what I may not have done. I needed to find the reason why my brother was not healed. So I began in that little place and journeyed.
That first step.
And as I read, it was from a place of brokenness. But I made that decision to arise and keep going and find a solution to where I am. And that's what has brought me here.
I think that is so awesome, and it's such an important tip to understand. A lot of times, we tell people you have to have faith. And so when we're starting and we don't have that confidence, like, why don't I feel confident in the faith I'm supposed to have? Why don't I feel bold? Why don't I feel brave? We feel like we've already failed, but we don't understand that we don't start out being courageous, being brave, that we might start out in ignorance, not knowing how we're supposed to feel, or not knowing, moving from one step to another might be anger, might be anxiety or anxiousness, but you keep going and you keep pushing, and then you get to that place where your faith is growing because you haven't give up and you're just taking that single step, and everything has been it's just opening up and you're seeing yourself growing in that sense of your faith. And I want to ask, I'll start with you, Suzanne, how do you feel about those words? Were those the words that you got while you were reading the book, that wow, she's brave, or hearing her experience now, would you say that she was experienced in warfare, or now she's experienced in warfare?
I felt it from the very beginning of the book, because even as a child, she had to be courageous and take care of her siblings.
Right.
She started out getting all these wonderful gifts, and life was beautiful and magical and just like a fairy tale. And then, God says, okay, we're going to change her course for a minute.
Wow.
And is at that point, she didn't even realize it, but she had to be brave. It's like, I don't want my siblings to experience all of the harshness.
Right.
So I'm going to put on this armor, and I'm going to wear it.
Right.
And then when her mom actually, fell from glory, with her business and her marriage, and she could see how weak her mom was, again, she's like, let me put this on, and let me carry this as well. What can I do to smooth this out for her?
Right.
How can I make the outlook better for everyone that I encounter? And that's what she did. And even when she was feeling weak and broken and crying, she always reached out to God. And that helped me to see in my own life that I'm kind of on the right track, because when things go wrong, I'm not crying out for my spouse or my children. I'm crying out to God for help. And He, helps to grow, gives us the courage to grow our faith. Faith comes in stages. You like to say, you don't get it right away. It comes. But she showed that from the beginning. And you can see her growth is what she's talked about. You can see how she went from a child, and then as an adult, now she's that much tougher, and she can take on even, more of that challenge, and her coat is bigger.
Right.
Her courage is stronger.
I like that.
Stronger, right. Anybody like to jump in?
And the sword is bigger too.
Yeah, the sword is much bigger.
Amen. Amen. Ms. Linda?
Oh yes, I enjoyed the fact that when she lived with her stepmom, that propelled her. That condition wasn't what she had been used to, and it propelled her to want to be greater. I must be great. There must be something better out there, and it just felt so beautiful to see that little girl who desired to be great, and that thing that was within her, that the Lord has placed in her. So I like that. That touched me a lot. I want to be in the choir. I want to go to school. I want to go to college. I want to accomplish so much.
She was never afraid.
Yes.
It was never like, I'm not going to do it. It's kind of like, okay, God, push me forward. And she would push forward and do it. Her siblings were hungry. She says, let me go and get them bread. They have something to eat. I will find a way to pay for this later, but they need this nourishment. And she took that first step. And it wasn't like, oh, I better not. She just did it.
She just
and
did that.
God made sure she was safe to do it.
That's
It was
awesome.
very inspiring.
Yes.
When you think about in the Bible, when it talks about walk by faith and not by sight, a lot of times nowadays what we realize that a lot of people are waiting for signs and signals before we take a step, and it's like, if I do not see this sign or signal, I'm not going to do it. If I know that I don't even know when the next time my mother's coming, but I'm gonna go take this bread on credit because I'm walking on faith and not by sight.
Right, exactly.
Because if I knew my mom was coming today, I could confidently go and ask for
that's
bread.
good.
Right.
But if I know that I don't know the next time she's
Yes.
coming, but when I'm moving by faith and I'm being obedient, you're able to move without relying on the circumstances around
Yes.
you. And I think that was something that was that really caught my attention as I was reading the book.
Yes.
Wow, that's so good. That's so good. That's so good. I
I just can't wait to. I just have to commend Dr. Evelyn for being way beyond her years
Yes.
as a young child.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, what a gift from God. What grace. The grace of God was upon you,
Yes.
and I agree with Susan that from the very first chapter, we collectively see these adjectives of a warrior being unfolded
Yes.
chapter by
Yes.
chapter by
Yes.
chapter
Yes.
by chapter, and I was just so riveted in all the chapters to see how. I truly believe you were destined to be a warrior.
Yes.
Thank you.
And everyone doesn't have, the strength that she has as a child. You can be influenced by other siblings and whatnot. I had a sibling, and she was always doing mischievous stuff, and it's just kind of like, you're my partner in crime. I'm like, well, I don't want to be. But you did it because she's a sibling's a little bit older, and she'd do stuff like we're sharing a candy bar, and she's breaking it in half. She's got the bigger piece, and she's hurrying up eating it. She says, and the last one that's finished got to share their piece. And I'm like, well, you've got the most already. So the fact that Evelyn could just just do it and not be influenced by anything was really just, a testament of the courage that she had.
Yeah, and looking back on my life, I also see the hand of God, even though you were a very young child.
Yes.
Because to think that even my birth, my mom is so religious and wouldn't think that I want to terminate a pregnancy.
Right.
But she said for some reason when she was pregnant with me, it's like, no, I have 2 boys. I'm not ready to have another baby right now.
Yes.
So I want to really get rid of this pregnancy.
Right.
And then my aunt
No.
had to step in
Yes.
and said, okay, you have the baby and I'll take the baby.
Yes.
And then lo and behold, they have the baby and here is a baby girl.
Yep.
And for the longest, I was the only girl of my mom.
Wow.
Until when I was about 18 years and I had a younger sister. But every time my mother would tell me, when maybe I go back home, she's like, I wouldn't know what I would have missed if I had gotten rid of that pregnancy.
And that's why you had those wonderful gifts.
Yeah.
It's like,
So,
beautiful dresses, shoes.
I wanted to go back to something you said, Dr. Evelyn. You said, looking back, you see the hand of God on your life. And I read a quote once that said, true peace comes from knowing that God is in control. And, from your experiences, for me, I grew up in church. I know who God is. I know the things of God. And so sometimes when you're tempted to say, I feel like something is telling me, I know that it's God. But looking at your experience growing up, you went to church, but like you said, you were religious. And so we see throughout the book how what you thought was denial and rejection and being forsaken, it was still the hand of God orchestrating and moving behind the scenes. One of my favorite parts was when you talked about when you got accepted to school, you didn't get a placement at school and you had to go to community college. And I know for me, when I was my undergrad going to school and I would not get congratulations, you've been accepted. I was very devastated. That was really hard for me. But now looking back, my journey in my undergrad, even when it was my fault, I'm like, wow, it was God placing me at the right place at the right time.
Yes.
And it was still God's plan. Even when I made mistakes, God had factored that in there. And so, Dr. Evelyn, I want to ask you, especially with that experience about going to school, how was your mindset then when it was a no, or you felt like you had been on a detour, to now looking back, seeing that God indeed does rule in the affairs of men?
Yeah. Thank you, Jasmine, for that question. You know, like sometimes for all of us, we want to be like our peers. We want to fit in so bad. And whatever is the societal norm, that's what you want to conform to. So growing up back home in Ghana, you call it community colleges here, but we call it polytechnic back home. And the polytechnics were, as at that time, not now, a lot has changed since then. But the polytechnics were for people who were not academically good. So maybe you want to go learn some trade or something. And here I was, somebody who, by God's grace, I'm gifted academically. I mean, I top my class every time up until I'm done with high school.
Wow.
And you are expecting that you'll be about the first people to get accepted to move on.
Yes.
And then there is this detour, and my cousins are insisting, go to the community college because you will learn a diploma that you can work with readily. And I was so angry because, one, I wanted just to be like my friends. Number two, I didn't want to be perceived as dumb because I felt it was a shame if they ask you, where are you going? I say, I'm in the community college. No way, I don't want to go. But somehow my mother is like, you either go or you stay home. And so I had no option, and I went. But looking back, I would say that's about one of the best things that happened to me. Because I did the secretarial training, so I learned how to multitask and do all kinds of things, because if you are assisting an executive, you must be able to take the calls, schedule meetings, write minutes. Those times we did a short term, I'm writing 100 words per minute. I learned all that. Pitman short term. I have to type at high speed on manual typewriter.
That was a lot.
That
was a lot.
And I mean, it was a rigorous training. And I went through all that. But when I was doing my doctorate, my dissertation was about 400 pages. And I typed everything from start to finish. And as an author, every time I sit behind the computer, and if you see me on the keyboard, I'm very fast, because if I could type on a manual typewriter, the computer keyboard is very easy to type on. And I'm always grateful that I learned how to type. And then it also gave me that structure, organization, and multitasking and all of that. But thank God, he also knew my heart. So right from there, I was able to continue to the university, and I'm here now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Beautiful.
I again, sometimes what we think is rejection or denial, or we're being delayed, is actually God just setting you up for where he knows you're going to be, and so he's giving you that training. Leanne, I wanted to ask you, what story or experience in the book mirrored a time of faith for you in your life? Something similar or different, but you can see the same theme of like, wow, I remember when I experienced that.
Actually, it was the chapter on Dr. Evelyn's faith, because it certainly mirrored my experience in coming to know Jesus, because I thought I was a Christian as a young girl. As Dr. Evelyn's experience was when she went home that Christmas to spend with her cousins, and and the male cousin Dee Dee. You were whining a little bit about how
My
boring
dresses, as usual,
Christmas
and
was
my
going to be. I
shoes.
wasn't going to be all fancy
Yeah.
dressed and food wise and things, and then I get Dee Dee probably looked at you cross-eyed, perhaps saying, "Is that what you think Christmas is all about?" And then that's when he proceeded to tell you the true meaning of Christmas and Christ and Christmas, and led you to Christ, and you gave your you said the prayer of forgiveness and faith, and gave your heart to Jesus. And my experience was much the same. I was a teenager, and my father was newly stationed with military orders, so I was starting my high school in a brand new state, big school, and new friends, and lived in a little town, but every other block had a church. And the friends that the Lord gave me quickly invited me to go to church. And I was hearing terms that I had never heard before. I was brought up in a Protestant church, but I only had a belief that there was a God. I had been baptized and confirmed. My church believes in confirmation, which is sort of an affirming of the promises that your parents and sponsors and the congregation at the time that you're baptized as an infant.
Same here.
Once you're old enough to understand, then you affirm publicly. And so I thought I was set and good to go for the rest of my life. But at this church service, I'm hearing terms like, do you know Jesus as your personal Savior?
Wow.
And
Are you born again?
have you been born again? I don't remember anything else about what I'd heard from the podium from the pastor that day, only those words. And then a few days later, they were having a week of revival at this particular church, and they showed a movie that talked about Jesus' second coming. That was a whole new revelation to me.
Wow.
And I thought I had to question my faith, and I signed a card after that movie was shown, and the next day a Sunday school teacher came to my home, and we sat in the living room. My parents were in the other room. I was 15 years old, and it was as if the conversation that you were having with your cousin Dee Dee, I was having with this Sunday school teacher, and she explained my need to really understand what Jesus was all about.
Wow.
It's not just God, but his only Son that he sent for
Yes.
you. So that was the beginning of my true walk with the Lord, and my faith grew from there.
Wow.
That's wonderful.
Wow. That's awesome. I mean, Linda, do you want to share an experience that mirrored a time of faith for you in your life too?
Absolutely. I came from a rejected home. Had great parents, but they weren't there. So, I experienced a lot of rejection. And so I was looking for something to fill that void. And throughout college here in the States, and every issue that I'd been through, I realized right now that I was just looking for Jesus, and I still was trying to look for Jesus, but going through a lot because, I couldn't find Jesus to fill that void. So when I met my husband a few years ago, he started talking about God and talking about Jesus Christ, the Bible, and I was so mesmerized and excited about it. And I said, wow, I love this God. And I felt so much love after that because he took me to church, and I got to know more about Jesus, and it just changed a whole lot for me.
Right.
So, yes, that's my faith experience.
David, I wanted to ask you, what story, again, or experience confirmed that God is real? And that he is good. A lot of times it's easy for us to read the Bible stories and feel like it happened a long time ago, but like to just reflect over Dr. Evelyn's account and testimony, what story really stood out to you from the many ones that we've heard here that, man, God is good and he cares about us and he sees us?
I think it will have to be initially at the beginning of the book when she spoke about when she had just become a Christian and she was going to bed one day and was like, God, if you're real, wake me up at 3 a.m. to study. And her encounter with God revealing himself to her twice, right? And it just goes to show you how much God cares. I know, again, in the Bible talks about how he even cares about our hair. And if he knows when our hair falls on the ground. And, sometimes maybe you're thinking, yeah, right. I'm not too sure if you know when my hair falls on the ground. And, again, for me, I think when I realized, and I think you spoke it a bit in terms of what a mustard seed faith can do, that's when you're able to test God and hold him accountable to the things he said he will do and to the covenants that he has done and exceeded over the years. So even one thing that I always, like you said, how can you mirror this, or how does this look to you in your everyday life? There's one thing that I always pray for when I go to places, and it's to find parking right in front. To find good parking right in front of whatever the location may be. And I'm telling you, every time I try to say it's by chance and I don't pray, sometimes I don't get it. But there's times where I literally, and the prayer, I think a lot of people think prayer is supposed to be a long, drawn out segment where you're supposed to pray for 24 hours and everything. But sometimes it's just acknowledging God in that moment and just saying, hey God, I'm really tired. Can you just give me a parking right in front so I can go in and come back out? And I mean, initially, as I started to do this and I started to build up that faith, I was thinking maybe I'm just so lucky, right? Because again, I was holding that to luck. But then I started having friends that sit in my car. And I say this prayer normally just underneath my breath as we're approaching the destinations. And I have friends that sit in my car and, there's been about 2-3 of them that go, man, every time I'm with you, you always get good parking. And, that was an opportunity for me to talk to them about God and how good God is and how, like, hey, do you know I actually pray about this, like, all the time? So it just goes to show you that God is always there and he cares about the little things that we might not think is a big deal.
Dr. Evelyn, real quickly, I wanted to ask you, we know there are many encounters and testimonies in this book, Faith Warrior, but if you could summarize one thing that you've written about in this book that captures the goodness of God and how he has his hand in every area of her life. What I know is difficult because obviously it's a lot, but what is one thing that captures the goodness of God in your life?
Honestly, I think the core thing is what David touched about, the divine visitation of the Lord. Because, I was 17 at that time, and I'm very argumentative, and I think through a lot of things. And so when I became a Christian, I will always, sometimes I will ask myself, so this whole Christian experience, is it delusional? Is it very real? Is it like Paul said, maybe we have believed some fables and things like that. So I used to go through a lot of those thoughts. And deep in my heart, I wish that I would know or experience something that will let me know that, look, this thing is not a joking matter. So one of it was when I was going to bed and I had prayed, Lord, wake me up. I've done that about 3 times. Every time I will sleep through. And I don't know if I mentioned it in the book, but whatever I was waking up to study, it didn't even come on that exams. So the Lord knew and wanted to give me a good sleep. And I was so, it's like, no, I really want to, because like I said, everything must be, but I really need to touch on these things. it never showed up in the final exam. But the core thing was when the Lord visited me. And I want to read that portion because I think that's in chapter 9 on dreams and visions.
Right.
And one of the reason why this was a kind of, it really drove home the reality of God was that this experience, as you saw from the book, is already recorded in the Bible.
Right.
And I'm a young Christian. I don't know the scriptures like that.
Right, exactly.
I hadn't even read to that point to see that story. And then I have this encounter, and I'm reading from chapter 9, chapter 9, page 67. I said, the second visitation I had from Jesus occurred 1 month later, after his first appearance to me. I had been pondering on the first dream and revelation and had said to myself, I could not even look into his face. I was wondering what he looks like. While I pondered on these questions, I had another divine visitation. This time, I had just fallen asleep, and it was like when you are half awake and half asleep. All of a sudden, I saw the heavens opened, and I gazed into the skies, wondering what it was. As I looked up into the heavens, I saw a host of innumerable angels lined up in the skies. Some were lined up on the right side, and others were lined up on the left side of the open heavens. They wore long white robes. They had wings at their back, and each one of them was holding a large golden trumpet. Then the angels began to blow the trumpets. As they blew the trumpets, I saw the Lord Jesus descending from the clouds with that same immaculate, bright, blinding light. He descended and came very close to where I was gazing into his face and eyes, and he spoke these words, my children, behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me. It's been over 42 years when I prayed, the Father, help me serve you faithfully all the days of my life. So when you come, I will not lose my reward. And this experience has stayed with me for a lifetime.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good. That's so good. And I think to even see how staying with your mom, going to stay with your dad and your stepmom, then coming back to your mom and your stepdad, now knowing that you're aware that he's not your biological father, and even the experiences that you went through with that, I mean, all of those processes, and to just see how God brought you through that and still show himself to you as a 17-year-old and just say, listen, I've been with you all along. I've always been there. And you can hold on to that experience even in the midst of everything else that happened and not come out and be bitter or be angry, because somebody could have seen, the Lord reveal himself and say, so you could reveal yourself all this time and you allowed me to go through this. Like you saw me in the midst of everything that was happening. And we see that David said, it was good that I was afflicted. Like it was good because it taught me your ways. It taught me your goodness. It taught me, another translation said it helped me understand your commandments. Job said, I know after I've been tried, I'm coming out as pure gold. And we see that you're out the fire, Dr. Evelyn. We see the great things you're doing with your ministry and this book. And I mean, processes are not fun. they're very hard, and when you're in it, it doesn't seem that way, but it's very difficult. And I mean, just reading your early stories and seeing how you are now, it helps me understand. I see why she's such a great woman of faith. I see why this is what she had to go through. And one thing I remember, we had a conversation, and I asked her, I said, what is the greatest miracle God has ever done for you? I know he's done many things. He saved your life. We see that from the snake bite,
Yes.
from the car accidents, and you said being able to have children, the miracle of having children. And when I read the loss that you experienced with your first baby, and then the second pregnancy, and to God be the glory, being able to have 3 more children after that, I'm like, man, the process of getting there was not fun. You know, nobody ever wishes to experience something and then have to lose it. But I want to ask, I guess I'll start with you, Susan. What's a favorite chapter in the book for you that talks about a process, something that Dr. Evelyn went through, or you can even see in your own life? How do I want to put this? A process that helped you see where you may be or what you've come out of.
Wow, that's interesting. I think in life we go through many processes. Again, just the strength of Dr. Evelyn and seeing how God just planted her where she needed to be, not only for herself, for other people, especially her mom, who seemed to be a very, very strong person and had very strong faith. And when her mom was at her weakest point where she just couldn't even get out of bed, Evelyn was right there to pick up the pieces. You know, she didn't even think about what she needed to do for herself first. She thought about what she needed to do for her mom, to bring her mom up, to let her mom say, don't lose hope. Your life is not over. There's still other things to come. And Dr. Evelyn knew this because God had always been there guiding her.
Right.
I feel like God has been in my life guiding me as well. I can recall a time when I was at work and my mom had been in a car accident and she was in the hospital. And we couldn't spend a lot of time with her because she was in ICU.
Wow.
And God was like, halt, stop right here in your tracks. I had just gotten to work. He's like, you need to go to her right now. And I'm like, you know, without haste, I told my manager I have to leave. And he was like, well, you're scheduled to do the late shift and you have to be here till 7. And I'm like, well, you're going to have to find somebody to cover. And he's like, no, you got to find somebody to cover. I said, look, I have one mom. I don't care if the place shuts down today. I'm going to my mom. God told me to go. And he's looking like, you know, she's obviously crazy. Let me not even mess with this lady. But as I was, you know, packing up, another co-worker, and I could see his halo. We never really talked about his spiritual, you know, relationship with God. But he said, I will do it for you. I could see that something is heavy on your heart and you need to leave. So I said, yes, my mom is in the hospital and I need to go to her. And as I'm in the car, and I'm like, God, how will I communicate with her? She's hooked up to all these tubes and she can't talk to me. And God was telling me to tell her to hold your hand if she can hear you, to blink your eyes on certain commands. And as I went to ICU and I told her, I said, God told me to come and see you. He says that, you know, we don't have much time. And I don't even think I understood what he meant by much time. And I said, but I want you to know that I love you very much. And I said, if you love me, squeeze my hand. And she squeezed my hand. And I said, if you believe in Christ and you know that he's going to take care of you, blink your eyes. And she was just blinking her eyes. So through all this is probably like on a Wednesday. By that Saturday, she was gone. And it still hit me like a ton of bricks, even though he told me and showed me and allowed me to have that experience. But again, maybe a month later, like Dr. Evelyn, she came to me in the form of a dream with the garments that, you know, we had funeralized her in. And she was like, babe, I made it. I'm here. I'm in heaven. I'm up here with God. I mean, and it was so crystal clear. He had given me this message, told me it was going to be okay, and she confirmed I'm right where he said I would be. And with that, it just let me know that God had me on not only the right path, but he lets me know you're going to go through joy and sorrows. Things like this are going to happen to you. And it's going to be when you least expect it. And I know years later, my daughter was in dance, and we were having a competition on a Sunday. We never had a competition on a Mother's Day. And on this particular Mother's Day, all of my daughter's mothers had brought the grandmothers to see the performance. And I'm backstage helping my daughter get ready. And it wasn't until I went to go sit down and see the performance. I could not see the performance for the tears because all I saw was the moms. And my mom was not there. But it just shows you God allows you to go through pain, and He allows you to go through good times as well. And He lets me know that my life was not going to be, sunshine every single day, but that He was always going to be there with me no matter what. And I carry that daily.
Oh my goodness. If I may take the opportunity to read a little bit of my notes here, because this one was a pretty deep question for me, and I chose chapter 5 for being the chapter of the book that spoke to me most about the process and why, the turning point in your life. And those turning points allow us to go, for God to go take us through those to make us better and not bitter. And this chapter was obvious to me in representing that. And it really started and emerged, even though it was taking place in the primary years of your life, Dr. Evelyn, as a little girl who from birth, you had triumphs. You were given life. You were not aborted. And you entered into a life of abundant provisions, comfortable living, and being the only girl. You were the center of attention, and I thought it was so cute in the book. You said you were a spoiled brat.
And my red shoes.
And you described those in explicit details.
Because I love those
the red shoes.
And my silk dress.
And then came the hardships as you transitioned into a new lifestyle. At your young, tender age, you were introduced to then humble, very primitive living, where you were treated poorly, and you felt like an orphan. You mentioned you were starved and depraved physically and emotionally. And a slave, and you became a slave to your parents' divorce. Sadly, you became a shadow of who you really were, feeling helpless and trapped by your life's circumstances. And then it's at this point that with the shift from good to bad and not knowing if the future held any good again, you at your young life, you could have easily turned into a bitter person.
Yes.
and saw your life ahead as a bitter journey. Bitterness towards God, everyone in your life that caused you the pain. But at your tender age of 10, I just shake my head. You made a comment. You made a commitment to yourself.
Yes.
This is the key. You made a commitment to yourself and a promise in your heart that you were going to make something out of your life. You had the determination in your heart, and there was a shift in your thinking that was way beyond your years at 10 years old. And this was the turning point for the rest of the stories in the book, in my opinion. And it was at that time where you moved from the bottom of the class to the top, and you stayed there. Yes, you rode the top of the waves of academia.
Yes.
And God says in His Word that, and you quoted it, that you were the head and not the tail. And from then on, you were going to change your life for the better, and most importantly, for the future of your children.
Yes.
And look at these wonderful children that God has gifted you with. And the process continued throughout the stories in this faith warrior, and of trials and tribulations, triumphs and failures, and seeing God turn what was intended for evil into something good. And there was no room for bitterness at that point.
Yeah.
When you were learning all those things were working together for the good for those that loved God. Romans 8:28.
Wonderful.
Beautiful.
Reading the book, just seeing how, like we said, a process can be very uncomfortable. Sometimes we don't even realize it's a process until we're at the end. And I remember my mom's, Dr. Evelyn was looking for her report card, and she found one of her old ones, and she had a B in like statistics. And she's like, "Oh, this is the hardest class ever." And it was just this devastation. I was just like,
Really?
I would give anything to say this was my lowest grade. But she was just so, and to be able to read about where she was in her life as a 10-year-old and just saying, you know what, life without my mom would be horrible. And so no matter what was happening, it was also a process bringing out that determination and that drive and how she just has that go-getter attitude to be able to say, I'm going to pursue this no matter what. I want to ask David, if somebody who hasn't read this book yet, what is one takeaway that you're taking away from this book, and what is one thing that you can promise them that they will receive or learn reading this book?
That's a good question. I don't know if I've thought that far ahead yet. But the one thing I would say for somebody reading this book, the takeaway that you probably get from this book is, I'm trying not to be cliche here, but how great God is.
Yes.
Or better yet, how practical God is. Again, I keep repeating myself, and I say a lot of times as Christians in our walk, we think it's all a spiritual journey, and it's something that you wouldn't understand.
The two are separate.
They're separate. You don't understand. And I think when we read in the Bible, there are different stories in the Bible, from the lady at the well, God taking water, from the Good Samaritan, to God, even when he did his first miracle, it was at a party, at a wedding where they ran out of wine, and he, Mary said, "Hey, you better give us some more wine to drink." And she didn't care what was going on. She knew he was gonna turn up at the party. So it just made me realize that God has been a God of practicality since day one. And we as believers need to continue to remember that when we go through our everyday lives and our everyday walk. And I think a perfect example is through this book, as Dr. Evelyn has experienced different times in her life. And it's good to have the good times, but also going through the bad times and going through the valley, and how God can be right there with you in the good, but also right there with you in the bad, and has factored all those things in and knows the end goal, and does not want us to think he's never there, and he's always going to be there. He will never leave us or forsake us. So for anybody who is looking to see examples of how practical God is in our everyday lives, I would definitely recommend this book for you, because it will definitely open your eyes to how much God cares about the little things.
I like what you said, that God is God of the mountain and he's the God of the valley, and he sees us. Linda, would you like to add to that? What's the takeaway that you had, and what someone reading this book will also have?
That God loves you. I like that part where she said that, God said that I love you. It speaks to everyone, whether you're raising kids, just do not beat them, because, all that. And it speaks to the rejected. That's for me, the depressed, God. I remember a scripture in the Bible that says that for a brief moment I rejected you, but with deep compassion I come for you. And even if you were rejected or you're still being rejected, he loves you. And I enjoyed that part where time and time again she was rejected, but the Lord came through for her and always showed his love. So for me, I believe that people who've been wounded and have been rejected and are depressed and are down low, this is good for them, because God is always there.
Yes. Yes, that's so good. Susan?
Yeah, he definitely, God will pull you up at your weakest point because you have nowhere else to go. He gives you that drive. You have to fight because you want to survive. You have that Mamba mentality, as you will. And in today's society, if a young person would be like, oh, what am I going to get from this book? You're going to see her Mamba mentality. You're going to see how she rises up. You're going to see how she keeps pushing forward. You're going to see even when it's low, she's going to find a way to let God's light shine on her and bring her up. It just was such a testimony of it can be done. But you do have to put work in. And sometimes it might seem like you're over there in a corner just balled up and not knowing what to do. That's God allowing you to have the courage to grow your faith. Because sometimes people can be comfortable with their faith and they have to shake you up a little bit. Just like Kobe. He had to have that, injury to his Achilles to shake him up a little bit. But it helped him to come back stronger. Same thing with Dr. Evelyn. All of these little trials that she went through and tribulation, it just helped her to grow more and more and more. But not just within herself, she was always reaching back, helping someone. Be it a family member, ministering to other people, and she's continuing on that information in the society, as you indicated, we need it now. I mean, we are pressed. We're going through so much with the riots and the uncivil unjust and what's going on with the elections and, God, what are you doing to us? Is God saying, it's time for you all to rise up. You were getting too comfortable. You need to grow your faith. You have to know that I'm here. I'm always going to be king. I'm always going to look out for you, but I need your attention, and he has our attention now.
Yes.
Wow, that's so good. Leanne, a takeaway.
My biggest takeaway from reading this book is the assurance that God is good and he is real.
Yes.
I was hoping that you would have shared about the chapter 12 when you went to the convention.
Yes.
Just by chance you saw the advertisement. You were going through much mental torment, hearing the voices for 3 months, and I thought that's where you would have said that is truly where God was real, made himself real, because you were the only one in that entire auditorium that was filled to capacity. That evangelist from Israel stopped in his tracks the message he was sharing and said, I have a word for one person. And he spoke in detail of what you were,
That was
what was tormenting.
Amazing.
That was very deep.
And then before you knew it, you were up front.
Oh my goodness.
You don't know how you got there.
And Leanne, that also reaffirms what all of us have been saying about how God cares so much for us. Sometimes we see it's a very big world filled with so many people. So our problem is right now, where I am right now, does God know me?
Right.
Does he know my name and my address? Maybe he's busy attending to other people, but certainly not me. But he knows every one of us. And as Jesus said, he said, even the sheep, if the 99 are home and one is missing, he will leave the 99 and go
back for the
chase
one. Yes,
the one.
the
And
one.
that's how loving our Father is.
I that was gonna be my takeaway. And
Sorry, I took it from you.
no, I'm glad, because I think it's very important, even in today's now, with everything that's going on. You can feel like, well, there are people who are going through worse stuff than me.
Right.
And where is God, or he's not concerned about me, but God sees you. And I think that's my takeaway from reading Faith, whereas every step of the way, it hasn't been wasted. It hasn't been for nothing. He will surely take something there's always a remnant out of every experience, every process, and that God is using and is molding to make you who He's called you to be, and that even in the cloudiness and the ancientness of our mind and how we feel, that God sees us and He's aware of us, and He will send somebody all the way from another country, another continent, to see about us. And so, Dr. Evelyn, as we come to a close, we've heard, your testimony, we've shared our experiences, and I just want to ask you, speaking to the readers out there, potential people who will read this book and be blessed by it, how we have, what are the takeaways that you want somebody who reads this book, Faith Warrior, to walk away with?
Thank you, Jasmine, and thank you, everyone. We've had a wonderful time.
Yes.
And to the readers out there, I want you to know, we have just touched the tip of the iceberg. There are many stories that our discussion didn't touch on, that if you want to know, you have to get a copy of the book. And the takeaway will be, you will see that God is real, and that you must build your life on the Word of God. The second takeaway is that in all the processes that God passes you through is to make you better and not bitter. I had a turnaround in my academic life, which I believe if I hadn't gone to my stepmother's place, I'll maybe be trading or doing something else, because academically I didn't really care.
Wow.
But that process, that hardship, turned something in me, and now I'm sitting here, and I wear a title doctor, and it's because of that experience as a 10-year-old.
That's powerful.
So that's my second takeaway, that take the processes of God seriously. And the third takeaway that I will also share is that put in the work.
Yes.
Put in the work. All that we are doing here is because all of us are putting in the work, even to be able to talk about this book. And if you know the story behind this book, I wrote this book at a time that I had lost a business close to $500,000.
Oh, wow.
As young as I look, yes, I had lost close to $500,000 business. And I stayed home for 3 solid years. And it was during that time. It was my way of taking my mind off the things that I was going through. So I'll go into the office in the mornings and just sit behind my computer and write. And within those 3 years, I wrote 2 books. One already became a bestseller, and this is the second one. So like we are saying, it's a faith walk. And it's not when everything is rosy that you get up your loins and do it. And when I was writing it, I had no idea about the publication, whatever. But this is not self-published. It was actually picked up by Trinity Broadcasting Corporation. And for those who, just a little bit about TBN, they are one of the world's leading Christian broadcasting corporation in the world. And they did a print for this and have distributed it all over the world.
That's awesome.
I go on some websites, you see it written in German, other things I cannot even read, and tears fills my eyes. So even in our brokenness, God can birth something great.
This is awesome.
That is beautiful.
That is so awesome. I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you, Dr. Evelyn, for this awesome book. You can do yourself a favor. Pick up this book where books are sold, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. Pick up a book for yourself, for your family, and your friends. And remember that no matter what life brings, to keep fighting the good fight of faith. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Oh my goodness. That was so good.
beautiful.